and restaurant management from Eastern University. That recording thing has just shoved the bio out the way. I've got it back now. And he has an MA in Management and Leadership from Liberty University. So Colin is a certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and a certified Quality Process Analyst. So I'm going to hand over to them now, but you've got the picture that we're in really good hands this afternoon. Some pretty great experts here. So over to Krista and Colin.
Thanks, Suzanne. We'll try not to disappoint. We'll try to be capable.
You won't. I'm going to put myself on mute now, but there's no way you could disappoint.
Okay, thanks so much. So we put this together because we felt measuring, we often hear other teams struggling with it, especially when they're trying to figure out how do they measure, what are they going to measure, who's going to measure. We also understand sometimes there's a real stress put on a team feeling like they need to be able to describe the value that they're delivering to senior leaders, and it can be really difficult. So we wanted to just share the presentation to show how we're doing it in case it can inspire anyone else in their own efforts. So we're going to tell you the story of what we call our Innovation Index and step you through how it works. So let's begin. All right, first we're going to talk a little bit about our model area, which is our approach that we use to propagate continuous improvement. I'll give another little shout out to Bill Balzer. He wrote about this in his Lean in Higher Education book. So if you've read that, you've read a little bit about this already. We're going to talk about why it was so important to our team to measure our savings. Like this wasn't an option for us. We had to figure out a way. We'll walk through how the Innovation Index works, and then what we've learned along the way that can hopefully help you as you're thinking about how to measure. So first, I need to give a little bit of background about how we work. When we wanted to, like, as Suzanne mentioned, I came to the university in 2015, asked me to start a Lean program. What I wanted to do was I wanted to set up a model area. And the reason I wanted to do that was because it can be really hard for people to understand what Lean looks like without seeing an example. So I wanted to set up an area where a team was all in so others could come visit and try to learn a little bit about what it looked like, understand it better. It would help make it feel more approachable. The other reason we use a Lean area is because it's like a smaller place for us to do a lot of experimentation. It's kind of like practicing off Broadway. You know, you want to try something out without having it happen across campus and destroying everything at once. So we like this model area. It's like our little center of experimentation. We can prove those ideas out, show people what's possible, and then push the idea out to campus. It really helps when they feel like, okay, somebody else has already tried this. They're much more comfortable giving it a go themselves. So the partner, when I was looking around for a partner, I was looking for somebody who's willing to be the model area. Pam Gable, who's the executive director at the Shared Services Center, she raised her hand. So she's responsible for about 250 staff. She's a very committed leader, a very innovative leader. So she's like, bring it on, let's go. The other thing to know that's special about our choice of this model area is that it interacts with the other 19 schools and colleges on our campus. So we already had those relationships established. Whatever we were going to be doing here was going to be very visible to the 19 schools and colleges we support. So the last thing you need to know about our history is that when the Shared Services Center was started, it was a very tumultuous, contentious beginning. I mean, there was picketing on campus. It was a very difficult time. A lot of the faculty were very against the idea. So after it finally settled and got started, the Shared Services Center needed to show that they could deliver value. They needed to not just be able to do the work, but they had to do it better than it had been done before. There was a really big need to prove itself that they could do this. So if you know, sometimes you hear about people needing a burning platform to make a go of something. We definitely had a burning platform. We needed to make this happen. So when I began this, I was a team of one. So I needed to find a way to leverage what I knew to get that entire model area up and running. I couldn't afford to have them waiting on me to do rapid improvement events or, you know, one-on-one coaching. I needed a way to leverage this. And I thought the only way I can do this is just, I'm going to give away everything I know. I'm just going to like throw it out there. And this is how I would do it. This is everything I know to help you go succeed. Now have at it. And the way we decided to do that was to use a model that we ended up calling lean and daily work. And I've spoken at this at the 2018 conference, so this may be familiar if you saw that, but it really has 5 elements to it. And I think of this as a teach them to fish model. It's like, this is all you need to know to be successful. I wanted to teach them how to do continuous improvement, but I don't mean, I didn't want to just give them a class about lean fundamentals, teach them the 8 wastes and it's like, all right, good enough, I'll see ya. You know, you got it now. That was never going to work. I need to give them the mindset, the behaviors, the practices of improvements, essentially, how do they get from where they are to where they want to be? They need to be able to do it themselves and not depend on reaching out to me again and again. So here's the model that enables them how to do that. So first, we always start with metrics. So we kind of say, okay, what are your team's goals? Where are you at? How are you doing? What should you be focusing on? As simple as that, kind of what's happening right now within your team. The next piece is the visual board. Make those metrics visible. Help the whole team know where they stand and where some of the issues are. That's all it is, make it visible. The third part of this system is talk about it. Have a huddle every day in the morning. Look at your metrics, look at where you are, talk about how you're doing. When you're doing those 3 things, the automatic next step is to start improving. You're going to start fixing the gaps. You're talking about it every morning in huddle, what you're frustrated with, the obstacles you're facing. It naturally flows into, all right, what are you going to do about it? So they work on fixing the gaps. The last pillar is the leadership walk. Somebody has to care that you're trying hard to do better. And that's where the leadership walk comes in. This is about the leader might come by just once a month. That's all it takes. Somebody to come by and say, tell me how you're doing. Tell me how I can help. Do you need resources to do that? Do you need some strategic direction? Like, please do this improvement before you do that improvement. This improvement could really help us. That's all it is. This is the whole model. There's nothing complicated about it. So we taught this to teams. We got them up and running. I mentioned before there are 250 individuals at the Shared Services Center. It took us about a year, start to finish, to help all the teams get up and running. But you can see the issue here. The teams are making improvements, but how do we show it? How do we tell campus, here's what we're doing for you. We've taken this service. Now we're trying to make it better. We needed a way to show it. So we're still facing this big question. How do we know we're making a difference? How do we capture and share the results? Now, I know there's a lot of hesitation about measuring things in higher ed. People often feel uncomfortable They often feel like we don't normally do this. Why should we do it now? Why are you doing it? Am I in trouble? Is my job being threatened? Like there's a lot of anxiety around it. When I was in the automotive sector, we used to do this kind of thing all the time. And having worked in a couple different kinds of industries, I feel like some of those for-profit industries are often much more data oriented. They're more results focused. It's more immediate. It's more present, and people are more aware that results need to be delivered. I feel like in higher ed, that's a little bit removed from the day-to-day operation. So people were more uncomfortable with the idea of it. I think my background, having come into the university and having, really grown up in a different sector, I had seen this done before. I knew it could be done. And the real challenge was just, how do we do it in this environment? And how do we make it easy? So those were really our challenges going forward. What we ended up doing, I would say Hello Innovation Index. We had a contest and we said, we'll pay out a $25 Starbucks gift card. Somebody come up with a name for what we're going to call this, thing we're measuring. And somebody came up with the name Innovation Index, and it stuck and it was perfect. So here we go. Let me take you on a dive into what this is actually going to look like. So the end result, here's a preview. The end result is we needed some kind of a report that would tell us how we were doing. So this is just a little snapshot of one corner of it. And I just want you to hold this thought. We're going to do a deeper dive into what this report looks like in a minute. But I want you to see this is where we're headed, this kind of information. And now I'm going to back up and I'm going to show you how do we get there. All right, so here's our process. And again, the one thing I want to make clear is this is a process for staff, for any one of those 250 people working at the Shared Services Center to put their information in about a project they're working on and have the information flow all the way through to the Tableau report. They could not be depending on me. They could not be depending on my coaches to do this for them. So I needed a system that helps anyone, whether it's at the Shared Services Center or in the future, anyone on campus can report the results in a pretty easy way. So I will say we do offer coaching if someone asks, like, help me, I don't know how to do this, but they're really responsible for documenting and submitting their savings. So here's what it looks like. We start with that everyday lean idea form. This is back from our system, our 5 pillars. They have an improvement idea, they've done the work, and now they're finished. So they want to report their savings now. So what we do is we use something called a JOT form. This is it's a lot like a Google form, if you've ever used one of those. It's just a different application. But we created a form, and staff submit their findings into this intake form. We'll show you the JOT form in a minute so you can see what it looks like. This flows into Google Sheets. So we have a big spreadsheet that it flows into. And what the sheet does is it does all the calculations for them on their savings based on the inputs they gave us. And it also gives us a chance to review it and take a look before it flows into the next step. In early days, when they were first learning how to do this, Colin, who often coaches, he's responsible for kind of keeping an eye on things as they're flowing through this process. He would often reach out to a team and say, I know you think you thought you saved $1 million by fixing the printer, but let's take another look at that because it doesn't quite make sense. It's just kind of a sanity check for any ideas that's flowing through. Does it make sense? Does it seem like maybe they missed a piece? So we do the sanity check at that point and coach them if needed. And then the data is extracted into a Tableau report. So that's the whole thing. So let's take a look step by step at each of these layers in the process. So first up, I'm going to share the Everyday Lean Idea form, and then I'm going to hand it off to Colin to take you through job form, and then back into my hands to walk through Tableau. All right, so here's our Everyday Lean Idea form. It is not complicated. It's essentially a form that prompts someone through how to solve a problem. It directly follows the PDCA cycle, or Plan, Do, Check, Act, if you're not familiar with that term. Directly follows that. What we do have in here is we have little prompting questions, almost like you have a friend with you over your shoulder helping you step through how to solve this. So it's just questions, and then they can fill this out. We have it both in paper form and an electronic form now that we've gone virtual, but they just work through this as they're solving the idea. That's all it is. It's not complicated. You'll know right here in the middle, what will you measure to know if things are improved? This is one of our learnings. We found out that we often had teams would try to do an experiment and they would measure at the end, but they had forgotten to measure at the beginning to know where they were starting. And so we learned that, and we've updated this Eli form probably 2 or 3 times along the way as we were watching and learning where individuals were stumbling. We would improve the form to help them be more successful the next time. So this is our Lean Idea form, and that's where they started to get to do their project. Next step is over to you, Colin. If you can grab the, if you can share, take over from here.
All right.
This is our big technical handoff. Let's hope there's no, look at that, woohoo.
We good? All right.
We're
Here we
good.
go. Okay. So like Krista was saying, we use the tool Jot Form to make it easy for staff to submit those improvements and to calculate savings from those improvements. So I'll briefly go ahead and walk you through using an example or maybe several examples of some things that we see within the shared service center frequently. So the first thing that happens is, someone just puts in their email address, but titles the improvement that they actually made. So again, most of these things can be just copied and pasted directly from that Everyday Lean Idea form into this Jot form to make it very seamless. So for this example, one of our teams, the HR customer care team, which handles a lot of the phone calls, kind of the initial triage team for our HR transactions. Let's say they wanted to decrease the number of communications that they were having to send out to the customers. So they kind of just title that. They would select which quarter they completed the improvement in, select the team, and we have here all 26 teams listed currently at the Shared Services Center that they can select. We capture the owner of that improvement just for tracking to see if there's a trend, whether it's associates or supervisors, managers submitting. But then from there, like I said, it can just be a copy and paste from that Eli form over to the Jot form. So specifically for this problem statement, what they were experiencing and what a lot of teams experience is that they don't receive all the information necessary to meet the customer requests the first time. So there's often a lot of reach outs back to the customer asking for additional information. So this can slow down the process and add additional processing time, basically rework. So from here, then we want to know what they did about it, what they did to kind of relieve that problem. And often what teams here, they will create an e-form with necessary or required fields in order to get all the information that they need to submit a request. The next thing, just some simple questions. does the ELI fall into helping the customer primarily or the SSE? Right now, this is both, and I'll kind of walk you through what that looks like. But for this purposes, I just selected the customer experience and also change board. So this is something that's a regular meeting with our senior managers and our executive director, Pan Beable, where we prioritize resources, understand if there's any risk with making a change, or understand how the change will impact others before we proceed with making that change. So because this e-form could affect multiple people and require resources to be built, this would be something that goes to that change board.
Colin, let me interrupt for just a second, if you don't mind. I just want to point out one feature of this, something we learned along the way. If you'll notice, there's like small text under these boxes that they're trying to fill in. Again, that's an area that we put some prompts to try to help people make the right choice and fill out the right thing. Anything we can do to sort of help them along with our structured forms, we've learned that that is a big factor in helping them be successful.
All right. Yep. So so with this, primarily for this example, there would be SSE time savings, customer time savings, and reduction in wait time. But with this form, the benefit is that staff can just choose that area of improvement that applies to their specific problem or experiment that they ran. So not all of these may be applicable. So depending on what it is, they would just select the categories that would be necessary for them to submit for. But for this example, those 3 categories, but then I'll also just walk you through the whole form. And once you click it, it does do a drop down. So again, it's to makes it a lot cleaner and easier to navigate. So for this, because the issue was them having to reach back out to the customers, we want to break that down. So one of the things that we want to understand from the SSE time savings is what was the time saved not having to communicate back to those customers. So they're getting information, a request coming in, but they don't have all the information, so therefore they have to reach back. So how many times do they reach back? What we do is go off of a occurrence and time per occurrence measurement to get those savings. So for something like this, let's say they had to reach back out, 10,000 times in a year. That's high, but we have a lot of transactions. So just for this example, let's say they had to reach back out 10,000 times, whether it's email or by phone. But now with that e-form where they get all the required information, now they don't make any. They don't have to reach out at all because they have all that information there. And also, every time that they had to reach out, we want to understand how long that took each time. So whether it's on the phone or email or whatever it is, let's say it took them 4 minutes to compose an email or talk to somebody on the phone. And then again, now that with that e-form, they don't have to make that call or that email anymore, so it goes down to 0. So what we take here is take the before measurement and the after measurement and calculate the difference to understand our savings.
Let me jump in again there. If you're not used to doing this kind of thing, this is one way that we found it works is if we're trying to think of how many times did it happen, it's really hard for people to come up and think, well, it happened 10,000 times this year. They're never going to know that. But what you can coach them to do is you can say, well, how many times did it happen in a day? How many times did it happen in a week? Like, if a lot of teams rarely have reporting in place that will give you the information you need. They're going to have to take their assessment, their best guess, and it really helps to coach them through that as they're learning how to do this by framing it in a way that they'll be pretty good with the answer. They'll say, well, I think it probably happens at least twice a day. And so we're saying, okay, 10 days, or 10 times in a week, how many weeks in a year? And you can work your way toward that. The approach that we've taken is that we always, when we have to do an estimate, when we don't have data from a report, is that we go very conservative. Take your lowest estimate and be on the conservative side so that you can always feel confident that you know there are probably more occurrences than that, but you never feel like you're challenged. Like you feel very confident in the estimate that you came up with if you go on the conservative side. And that's what we tend to do when we need to rely on an estimate rather than hard data. The other thing you can do is you can have the team measure. You can say, well, should we measure for a week? Do we need to measure for a month? And have the team actually record how many occurrences they see. So those are a couple different approaches you can do to get that number. And we usually, when the team is learning how to do this, we do coaching like that as they're first learning how to measure their improvements when they're working their way through that everyday lean idea form. Okay. Thanks, Colin.
Yep. And so just to kind of continue on briefly with this. So because there's also that other side, so not only are SSC staff reaching out to people for more information, now the customer is replying back to that message. So it would also be something similar to 10,000 times 0, I think about 4 minutes before for them to respond back. And now 0 again with that e-form. So all of that eliminated, that back and forth is now eliminated. And then also there's a way to calculate that wait time or that pending time that request was just sitting. So let's say, again, we had 10,000 requests that came in. Still 10,000 requests, but now what was happening before is because we had to wait for our customers to respond back to us. It could take multiple days, and we calculate this in hours and business hours. So say it took 3 days, we would calculate this at 27 hours based on a 9-hour workday. So that's the amount of time that the request was sitting and not being handled. And then now with the e-form, we can maybe tackle it the same day. So we can close out that entire request within 4 hours. So that was that wait time piece that we can also add to that. In addition, some things that we also calculate are direct cost savings and avoidances. So direct cost savings, an example, like Krista was saying in the small print, there could be money saved directly from paper or postage, envelopes. So in case we had to send out certain information to retirees, that could be only sent out by mail. And we kind of found an electronic way to do that. That would be eliminated. And also the same thing, if customers had to mail something to us, we can kind of estimate what those savings would be. Cost avoidance. So this is something I see when maybe someone's trying to defraud the university, or we have duplicate payments that we don't have to pay out that we caught ahead of time. So we avoided paying out that cost or that money. Work absorbed. So this is something that is really, at the heart of the SSC, trying to get rid of that administrative burden from campus. So this is work that could have been done from a campus unit and now is brought over here so that those units can do more value added work. So the work that came back into the SSC from campus, and also new work. So for this is stuff that was never done at the university before. It could be a new law, federal or state, or I think a recent one was kind of a new insurance offering. So we had to query on that information. So it's a brand new process that didn't exist before that we are now taking on. So we want to understand our capacity at that from that standpoint. So those are the quantitative measurements that we look at. But let's say that there weren't any dollar savings or time savings for this improvement. We still want to understand that measurement of how much your experiment or improvement made. So if they don't have any quantitative information to record, they can skip this whole thing, go to next, and record some qualitative improvements. So we see these from the senior managers doing very strategic initiatives, or from surveys that we send out. So say our employee engagement survey went up from 85% to 95%, or surveys from customer satisfaction. So we want to understand that we actually did make an improvement, even though we may or may not have saved dollars or hours. So from this, like Krista said, this will go and populate into a spreadsheet for review, and then finally end up in that Tableau report that I know she's going to touch on. So,
Yep.
all right, I'll
All
stop.
right, I'm gonna try to take the screen back. All right. Are we good? Graham, can we see my screen again? Awesome. Okay. So we looked at the everyday lean idea form. This is where we start. We looked at the job form. When they're done with their idea, they use that to submit. And now finally, I'm going to show you what the reporting looks like. So let's go directly there. All right, we saw this preview at the top before. Again, you can see the different buckets of savings that Colin just walked you through. The reason we do this, why do we put it in a bucket? Why don't we just have one big bucket? What we've learned is that there's sort of two things. It really helps when you're trying to measure the impact of a project to break it down into its smaller pieces. It helps you focus on each piece and really quantify it much more easily than just telling somebody, hey, can you give me the whole story? You know, I don't want any detail. People need to break it down to be able to add up the little pieces. And so we help step them through that thing. The other thing that we noticed is that when people are quantifying a project, they always tend to think about it from where they're sitting. They think about what they had to do. They think about the effort of their team. And they often forget that there are other teams involved. So the most common one we always saw was if you're on the phone, like doing something, they always capture their own time, but they never think of the person on the other end. And it's really easy to miss that they're just focused on their own improvement, their own impact. And so when we break it out like this, it kind of forces them to stop for a minute and think, is there a wait time? Is someone else involved? Is there another team that is affected by this? So that's one reason we do it. Now, when we look down here, what we can see, we've been doing this since fiscal year 2018. Oh, reloading content. I'm sorry about that. We'd stepped away from it for long enough that it wanted to like reload and get fresh. Okay, here we are again. So we break it down into both cost savings and hours. Really, it's just two sides of the same coin. And I guess I should speak to that. When we ask our teams to report the savings, we never talk about it in terms of cost. We always talk about it in terms of hours. It keeps them focused on measuring the time, which is where we want them focused. Get rid of the time, make it faster, make it easier. We don't want them to focus on the cost. The spreadsheet can do all that calculation. They don't need to do it. They don't need to bother with it. Just focus on the time and the effort. And so we do report it in both, but we never ask it, we never give a team targets. You have to save a certain amount of money. What we do say is we want you to keep working on improvements. We don't give them a specific dollar that they have to, like a goal in that way. Our goal is that you just try to make one improvement every quarter. And some of them are like little tiny things, and some of them are a home run. But we just want them to continue thinking and trying. So with this, you can see like it's been, you know what, we just started our 5th year doing this. It's like 250 people, and they've saved $35 million in these last few years. Now, granted, a couple of these, like here's a huge cost avoidance saving for 10 million. So there's like, some of them are like really outsized. I think there's 1 or 2-ish. Yeah, here's one for 7 million right above it. So that's like separate. We could pull those out. It's not that they weren't real, but it was like they were single huge events. One of our teams figured out a way to protect and identify potential fraudulent payments. One of our accounts payable teams, and they managed to prevent a $10 million payment going out by accident from the university. So, I mean, it was a real savings, a real cost avoidance. So that inflates this overall number. But even so, you can see these 250 people have been able to make a huge impact with just their day-to-day. I'm just gonna, keep on chugging along with little improvements. Now, let's go into some detail. Let's see. Here we go. It's going to load again. It's going to take us down a layer. Should be taking us down a layer. There we go. So who uses this? The managers, the shared services managers, the supervisors, sometimes our senior associates. What we're trying to do is we're trying to understand. So these are all our teams. We keep track of the number. So accounts payable, they've had 65 everyday lean ideas that they've, so we kind of keep track of who's doing what. This chart over here shows us how many improvement ideas were put in each quarter. So you can see we probably average in the high 40s, around 50 ideas each quarter. Since we started, we've had 773. And then down here, we keep track. We want to see 100% of our teams putting in an idea. And so we keep track of that. So this quarter we just finished, we had 89% of our teams put an idea, and we're really trying to get to 100%. The other thing that's nice about Tableau, if you haven't used it before, is you can click on a team. Like let's click on student guest reimbursement. They've put in 27 ideas. When I click on this, the form automatically adjusts so that manager or supervisor of that team can look and see, okay, this is what the student guest reimbursement team did, 27 ELIs. These are the ideas that they submitted. So it gives a deep dive into exactly what they've accomplished. So this is really helpful when you're trying to look back and report at the end of the year, what the heck did we do? You can do the same thing on the first page. You can just click on your team to find out what do we accomplish this year. And for Pam, our director, she has the global view of it all. What did we do collectively as a group? So if I just click again, it returns me back to the full picture of all the teams together. One thing I should say, the other thing this little section does for us is it helps us kind of keep an eye on, are we improving the customer experience or are we improving our own experience? Sometimes we want to be really careful that we're not just like doing things that are good for us. It's like the goal is to make this better for our customers. Sometimes that means we have to work on internal processes that we're stumbling over. That totally makes sense. But we don't want the balance to shift too far inward. We want to be thinking, what can we do to make this easier, better, faster, more affordable for our customers? So we kind of keep an eye on the balance here between the gray areas where it's improving our internal process versus the blue where it's all about the customer. The last tab, this is one that we use to measure some strategic initiatives that we put in place. Like one of our goals for this year is to save 20,000 hours internally. That's something we want to achieve. And so whenever a submission is made to the index that affects internal hours, it's captured here. So at a glance, the management team can see how are we doing toward those two goals. So let me take you back in. Okay, so we've looked at the three forms that we use, the way we report this out. Let's go forward again. So what are we measuring? What are we looking at? Obviously, I showed you the stuff, which teams are submitting, how many ideas, who are we saving time for? But really what we're trying to pay attention to is, are they doing it? All we really want them to do is keep going. They're doing good stuff. Just keep going. Keep making improvements. The other big question is, are they learning? Are they getting better? Right? We want to know, are they getting better? And one of the ways we do that is by looking, Colin tracks this. This is our first time through. So we track what's the percentage of staff, like how many of our ideas each quarter can Can they submit the first time through? They put it in the JOT form. It goes all the way through into the index without any touches from the coaching team, like no problems. They nailed it on the first try. They knew how to do it. And you can see when we started doing this, early days, 23%. Almost everybody needed a little bit of coaching help to try to figure it out. But what we've done since then is we kept redesigning the forms to prompt the right behaviors, the right responses. This, I think, is the third version of our innovation index. And each time we do it, we refine the questions a little bit based on the problems that we saw teams struggle with. One of our most common errors is that people try to do the calculations themselves and try to force it into the form. And we're like, no, let the form do the work. You don't have to go that far. We're not asked, because often that's where people make mistakes in a calculation. They get twisted up. So we put that all into the spreadsheet so there's no mistakes. They just have to think about how often does it happen, and when it happens, how long does it take? Let's see. The other thing, I should point out, like you can see that it dipped down a little bit right here. This is like right kind of as hiring restrictions are lifted. We had a ton of new hires. A lot of folks who had never seen this before, never done it before, who were trying to submit. And so we saw the drop there. Some of them struggled a little bit, but I'm pretty excited that we didn't go all the way back to 23%. Like, it's like they've got it. We've figured out what they're doing. The other thing I want to point out that, back to, are they learning? These teams have been doing this now for several years. We still have a lot of turnover, right? This is an entry-level position. So we might keep people with us for a couple of years, and then they're ready to move on to their next challenge. So a lot of team turnover. Are we retaining that tribal knowledge? Are they still learning? Are they getting better? And what we have found is that yes, over time, their projects are getting more sophisticated. Our executive director invested in creating a business analytics support team and a robotic processing automation support team. So now our teams, like if they can come up with an idea of something that maybe needs to be automated, now they have that RPA staff that can help them automate it. And so our improvements are continuing to get more sophisticated and deeper. They know a little, our teams know more about continuous improvement now, and they see the opportunity, that old Mike Rother book, Learning to See. Now they see it, and now they've got the tools to do something about it. So yes, we're excited. They're continuing to learn. I can't stress again that all the things that have happened by these teams, they have done the work, not my team. The staff has done the work to make this happen. I mean, our goal is really to work ourselves out of a job so we can go help other teams on campus, right? This is our model area. We're trying to prove these teams can do it. All right, let's keep going. I only have one or two more slides. So you might ask, what do we do with the savings, right? We're seeing all that money, millions of dollars in savings. What do we do with it? Two big things. First, the Shared Services Center has not increased costs since it went live back in 2014. We've held costs steady to campus for our services. So this means, every year when someone gets a merit increase, we have to make sure we save enough to pay for those increases for the team. So it's like hold the line, and we have committed to not increasing rates through 2024. So it'll be a full decade at the same rate that we're charging to campus for these services. The second thing that's happened, when we started, we were offering 13 different services. So now today, we actually offer 26 services for the same rate that they were paying in 2014. So that's what we do with those millions of dollars. We essentially give it back in increased service to campus. It's our commitment to offer more. It's what we needed to do in the first place to sort of prove the value of the SSC to campus. So that's where it's going. I think if you did this work with the intent to cut positions, I think people are very quick to pick up on that, and you're going to get a lot of resistance about doing this kind of work. But when we position this to the team that we're doing this work so we can help campus, that's our mission, to transform our work, make it better and better, you get a lot of people that are very excited about that. They want to be part of that. They want to offer more. So it's pretty easy to get people engaged. So what have we learned? I've mentioned this before. Break the project down into smaller pieces. It's much easier to like build those smaller blocks into the total. Frame it for them. Think in terms of how often does it happen? How long does it take? And start building those blocks to get the total cost. Again, people do best when they're prompted, when they have a little help along the way. And having a very structured form helps. Something that they know how, this is how we do it every time. These are the steps I take. Finally, help them make sure they need to determine what success looks like at the beginning of the project. As they're thinking about their idea, what are they going to measure to know if they succeeded? And just that question to your team, if you're coaching them, is often groundbreaking for some teams. The idea that they would need to measure something to know if it got better, it is, often a tectonic shift for some teams. It's like they've never thought about that before. They've never heard about it. They've never worked to a goal before. I work with a team recently in another unit on campus, and we talked about that. Well, what's your goal? Are you trying to do it, and are you trying to get this work done and your turnaround in 2 days or 3 days? And we just got blank looks. The idea that they would try to provide a service with some kind of goal for how quickly they would provide it was completely foreign to them. And I thought, well, don't you use Amazon? Have you never, they say it'll be there in 2 days or 5 days. It's like, a goal. And there was just nothing, no reaction. So sometimes just starting with that question, how will you know if you succeeded, can be enough to set a team on this path to improvement. Finally, our next steps, we've developed the Innovation Index, we've polished it, we've improved it like 3 times. We're ready to roll it out to one of our campus customers. We've had a couple of units who are doing a lot of continuous improvement work. They're also using the lean and daily work model, and they're ready to have a way to capture their improvements as well. So our goal is to get at least one other school or college using this by the end of the year. All right, that's what can we answer? What can we answer about this model, this approach to measuring?